1 o'clock. CBS News. The Apollo and Soyuz spacecraft of the United States and the Soviet Union are linked in space now. The actual rendezvous and docking were accomplished without a hitch amid cries of contact and capture, and we have succeeded from the two sets of crew members. I'm Christopher Glenn, reporting on the CBS radio network. Just after docking, though, astronaut Tom Stafford noticed a problem. Correspondent Reed Collins is keeping track at CBS News Space Headquarters in New York.
When the Americans opened the hatch to the docking module, they were greeted by an acrid odor, which has not yet been explained by Mission Control. Moscow Control was notified, and so were Leonid and Kubasov out on the Soyuz, attached to the other end of the docking tube. One working theory is that the smell comes from scorched Velcro, a strip of which was used to close the door of a tiny furnace inside the docking module. Some gold was in there, cooking in a weightless metallurgical experiment. Early today, the astronauts had used the Velcro to hold the furnace door shut. Whatever the case, the men are continuing their work toward opening the rest of the hatches and giving the personal greetings to their counterparts who are waiting out there just a few feet and two more hatches away. This is Reed Collins, CBS News Space Headquarters, New York.
There's word now from the TASS news agency that the Soviet Union has launched yet another Earth satellite today. This one is unmanned. The new satellite is number 750 in the Cosmos series. More CBS News in a minute.
CBS News. CBS News. The historic Soviet-American handshake in space is just minutes away. I'm Douglas Edwards, reporting on the CBS radio network. Keeping tabs on the flight of Soyuz and Apollo, now joined in orbit, is Reed Collins at CBS News Space Headquarters.
The plan calls for cosmonaut Leonid to open the last hatch leading to the docking module, and for astronauts Thomas Stafford and Deke Slayton to exchange greetings with Leonid and Kubasov, and then a shake of hands. This symbolic meeting calls for an exchange of flags, Soviet, American, United Nations, the signing of flight documents, the joining of a plaque, and the exchange of seeds and personal presents. The space race has been superseded, sort of, by a communications race. It was announced early that President Ford would call the joined spacemen at the half hour. Swiftly, it became known the Soviet party boss Brezhnev would call them too, and he would get his message through first. The final checkouts for this face-to-face meeting and greeting now are underway. This is Reed Collins, CBS News Space Headquarters, New York.
Large enough for a single man to get through. The compartment itself is much wider, though. Oh, indeed. The compartment, again, is the diameter. Where did I put my book? Diameter 4 feet 8 inches maximum diameter. About 15 feet 4 inches long. All right, there's part of the problems. I don't know whether you picked that up or not, but they've lost the Soyuz line. Again, once they get the hatches open, many connections will be made on television and communications between the spacecraft. All will be going to the Apollo spacecraft then. That is Stafford speaking to Leonid there.
Stafford has announced he's working on step 24 of the tests that have to be done before opening the hatch.
And he has his hand on the hatch. He is opening the hatch to the tunnel. The click that you might be hearing there, the slap, the click, is the hatch handle. Mission Control is losing Tom here at the Johnson Space Center, but it's coming through into Moscow. We are getting Stafford and Slayton communicating with the crew through the Soyuz air-to-ground line.
Got a great picture, Tom, in the hatch. David, it's not actually being picked up in Moscow either. I've got the Russian both air-to-ground and the air. They've opened it.
There's the hatch.
Thomas Stafford has opened hatch number 3, and Kubasov and Leonid are visible now through the mission monitor. They're down in the Soyuz, the orbiting module. They're very, very close to that first handshake. It's just about to take place. We're, of course, keeping our air to ground up, and we'll be listening to the conversation.
Turn it off, and we'll turn it on.
To set the scene, Deke Slayton and Thomas Stafford are in the 10-foot-long docking module. They've been pressurized to the same atmosphere as the cosmonauts fly in their Soyuz. Vance Brand is back in the Apollo, and he, of course, is still at 5 pounds of oxygen per square inch.
Come in here and shake hands.
Stafford.
Kino Baker. Please sit down, пожалуйста.
Please sit down, please. Come here, please. And the cosmonaut is coming through the hatchway.
Looks like they got a few snakes in there, too. Yeah.
Few snakes, referring to all the linkage and lines that go around people in space. Not quite down to the shirt sleeve attitude yet. Give me your hand.
Our viewers are here. Come here, please.
You can see the face of Alexei Leonid. He's working his way up.
Yeah, you need to see that. Yes, come here.
Turn
on the camera. Hit the remote. Okay. Here.
Now the ship.
Glad to see you. Here. Pass it to Alexei. Punch it right. Punch it right. Very, very happy to see you. This is Soyuz and the United States.
They're both shaking hands. Deke Slayton reaches in and gives Leonid a hug around the shoulders. The closest thing to a good hug you can do. In limited space.
Come here.
Kubasov comes up. He shakes hands with Stafford and now Slayton.
Valery, how are things? We do.
So it's happened and is still happening. Presents are going to be exchanged all around. Stafford works his way through the hatch that will lead to the Soyuz. Slayton remaining in the docking module during what they call the first transfer.
Command Module Houston, we're still not hearing Soyuz well. Are you hearing them?
Loud and clear. You see us on the picture?
It is a difficulty. The Soviet crew cannot be heard distinctly.
Hey, here, there.
And Stafford has made it all the way into the
Vance, in order to
orbiting module.
check the configuration, would you check on page S1-40?
Houston has Vance Brand checking something back in the Apollo.
We'd like you to check the configuration as per S system checklist 1-40.
They believe that maybe the communications were not established properly, and that's the reason that the cosmonauts can't be heard well.
Roger.
Oh, Vance Brand, the man who speaks the best Russian of the three Americans, doesn't get a chance to try it out first. Everything's gone reasonably well. The Americans and the Soviets have compromised the environment under which they live in space to where they can now pass back and forth. But I see the beautiful. And they're making some exchanges of personal.
How do you rate Houston?
We read you loud and clear, Tom.
Okay, did you get the picture?
Roger, we've got a good picture of the hatch and you people inside there in our tunnel.
Can't really see what they're doing down there because you get a better view of Tom Stafford's knees than you do of Leonid or Kubasov, who are still being shown in their own spacecraft through tunnel doors. Everybody has a checklist for this. This is just as really detailed as a countdown for every move that's going to be made. Nothing really ad-lib or free yet about the reading. And now Moscow's being called. I believe it's about time for the Brezhnev message, which he had requested that he be allowed to make. At least that was the best information. Now I believe we may have some capability of seeing what Moscow side is seeing. My colleague correspondent Steve Young. Steve, what's happening?
Well, just after that handshake, which the Russians call a handshake in space, and if I can take a stab at pronouncing it, it's something like Rukopuzhatye Kosmosya. References in the Soviet press to that symbolic handshake in space. Great round of applause went up in Kaliningrad, which is the Soviet mission control. And as you can imagine, the press at this press center also is very intently watching. There is a very large contingent of communist press. In fact, I'd say maybe 4/5 of the 600 or 700 newsmen here are from communist countries, sister countries to the Soviet Union, and they also are gathered around many monitors here in the press center, even leaving the bar for a moment at least to witness this symbolic moment.
Well, they've had several Puzhatnyas so far, and all of those go well, but it seems that moving around is not quite as easy as had been anticipated. And we see occasionally through the mission control monitor what is the Soviet side, that is a camera that is in the orbiting module itself from the Soyuz. You get that there, Steve?
Yeah, I think so, Reed. And, there was a news conference here which concluded just about an hour ago, and the Soviets have been showing extreme sensitivity to any question from any newsman which at all seems critical to them. One of the Polish correspondents wondered whether the camera used to show the approach and docking was the American or Soviet camera. Of course, it was the American, since we saw Soyuz, and it got to the point where the Soviets started turning aside any questions. They seem to be so thin-skinned then.
Yes. Steve, the reason for the hiatus now, at least in activity, is that Premier Brezhnev Chairman Brezhnev is speaking his congratulations to the men. Therefore, they've all sort of come to attention, as close as you can come to doing that in weightless space. And we could bring in a little bit and listen to some of that, which has now appeared on the Apollo line.
Positive movements ahead in Soviet-American relations have created the proper conditions for the first international space flight.
The translated message from
New possibilities are opening up for fruitful development of scientific cooperation between countries and the peoples in the interest of peace and progress of all humanity.
Apollo, go ahead.
To you, the courageous conquerors of space, have the great honor of opening a new page in the history of research. I wish you successful completion of the planned program and a safe return to Earth. Leonid, Brezhnev.
And there it was, the communications race for space was won, as was the first venture there, by the Soviet side. Brezhnev got his word in before President Gerald Ford, whose communication appointment is 3 minutes hence. And now we're seeing a little more activity. Vance Brand was being spoken to. Again, he's been trying to configure the spacecraft communications so they can get better communications from the Soyuz. The Soyuz is inactive now. It's been passive ever since before the docking took place. It is running very little of its own system now. In fact, most of it's been shut off. so that the Apollo can do the communicating and can supply the energy, the electrical energy, and the propulsive power, as was the case in achieving the rendezvous and the docking. And the Soyuz will get a chance later to de-dock and see if it can redock with the Apollo. But right now, it's all being supplied on the one side, the communications and the power. So now we hear a little more conversation back and forth.
Once more, we'd like to thank you for these warm words, and we'd like to say in answer, there's so much to say, and we have so little time.
And this is a response. The detente is becoming somewhat confused in terms of all the communication hoses and the vacuum sweepers that have to be extended, really, into the docking module. And so you get the impression that 4 men surrounded by several Herculean snakes are wrestling up there. They're not. They're really trying to stop the big wrestling match that's been going on down here.
Tom, we would like everybody around the table and the TV set up, and then we'd like Deke to give his headset to Alexei.
This is the plan. Dick Slayton has to lend his headset to Alexei Leonid, and Mr. Ford then will attempt to come on the line. We don't know exactly when this will happen. It may be a few minutes. It may take some time to get everything straightened up down here as well as up there. Some time ago, Deke Slayton was asked if he would mind, though, surrendering his headset to Colonel Leonid long enough for the colonel to listen to a message given him by our president. There's a big table that is sort of a collapsible table in the orbiting module, and around this they will array themselves, tie themselves down a little bit so they can come to attention, all 4 together. And this is being accomplished fairly slowly. This, of course, has never been practiced in actual weightless condition. They have rehearsed several times and all kinds of things that simulate that. Leonid and Kubasov have...
Apollo Houston, we're getting a pretty good TV picture from the orbital module, but it appears to be upside down. Check the shoot.
Have been fairly quiet because they've had not as much to do except to configure their spacecraft for the reception of the boarding party, whereas Stafford and Slayton have been working like beavers, working their way through the hatches. They may be a little bit fresher for this day. And they're getting organized. The transfer of the headsets taking place. Presumably, Donald Slayton will get to hear later what his president is saying, since he has to forego that pleasure for a few moments. Bright sun streaming into the orbiting module from some source. There was an odor problem that discovered by Stafford and Slayton when they opened up the docking module for the second time today. They'd been there before, and they had some gold and some other material cooking in the electronic furnace. It's thought that perhaps that odor came from a strip of material that was put around the furnace door, left there for some time. No one really seems to have troubleshot that to the point of being able to tell you what it was. Nothing going on now except the exchange of some documents around their little orbiting module table. This is, it's interesting how much of the detail really and the attention is placed in the positioning of the cameras and sort of setting the shot, as they say in showbiz. Just before the hatch opening, there was some discussion as to whether Donald Slayton's 51-year-old backside might not be too much in one of the shots that they were going to use for opening the hatch. Slayton, of course, the oldest of the 5 men there at 51. Alexei Leonid now has borrowed the headset. He's trying it out, I believe. And we see the scene from inside the Soviet craft itself.
Picture looks good. If f-stop is not full open, please open it.
As I say, there's a great deal to do with getting the right aperture, getting the right exposure, and getting the picture which both nations wish to present to themselves and to the world. That of cooperation around one table. The bow that we occasionally hear spoken to is the Capcom in Mission Control, Gerald. The flight director right now is Pete Frank, a man who was very nearly an astronaut himself, didn't quite make it, but settled for flight director and stays very close to the program. Alexei Leonid, the husky Siberian.
It's still a little dark, but if that's full open, that's as good as we can do.
Is in a little round white soft cap. The astronauts are in their striped soft headset caps.
Wide open. Roger, the only other thing is to verify that the proper lights are on in the Soyuz.
So while they get the picture arranged and have themselves arrayed around the table, Steve, we're informed that Mr. Ford is going to be perhaps a few minutes more getting ready while they get ready. Was there any noticeable interest or nuance in the Brezhnev message to the cosmonauts and astronauts, Steve?
Reed, can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you.
Well, we haven't really had very much time to assess the diplomatic implications of the Brezhnev message. There's one thing interesting about it, though. When we were at this end of things, planning our coverage, people who are used to having statements read to them either by a representative or by Mr. Brezhnev could not believe their eyes and ears when they saw that he was just to speak for a few minutes. I think that communist and socialist leaders seem to have a predilection for speeches that run no shorter than 1 hour. And the attitude of many people who are not just short-lived Moscow watchers as myself, but those who are here all the time, was that there must have been some mistake in the official schedule. And yet, I guess the exigencies of covering space and getting done with official ceremonies in a set amount of time caused Mr. Brezhnev to tear down his message to what? Just a few minutes this evening.
It was just a bare peroration, as you say, compared to some other speeches of the past. We're now about, I believe we've got Alexei's headset on, and we're ready for the President of the United States.
My very great admiration for your hard work, your total dedication in preparing for this first joint flight. All of us here in Washington, in the United States, send to you our very warmest congratulations for your successful rendezvous and for your docking, and we wish you the very best for a successful completion of the remainder of your mission. Your flight is a momentous event and a very great achievement, not only for the 5 of you, but also for the thousands of American and Soviet scientists and technicians who have worked together for 3 years to ensure the success of this very historic and very successful experiment in international cooperation. It's taken us many years to open this door to useful cooperation in space between our two countries. And I'm confident that the day is not far off when space missions made possible by this first joint effort will be more or less commonplace. We all look forward to your safe return, and we follow it with great interest, the success so far. And we look forward to talking with you on Earth again when you do end your flight. General Stafford, Tom, now that you've had an opportunity to test the new docking system, do you think it will be suitable for future international manned space flight?
Yes, sir, Mr. President, I sure do. Out of the 3 docking systems I've used, this was the smoothest one so far. It worked beautifully.
About 3.5 hours ago, I sat here in the Oval Office and watched the docking procedure. It looked awfully simple from here. I'm sure it wasn't that simple for the 5 of you. Let me, if I might... Yes, Tom. Let me say a word or two, if I might, to Colonel Leonid. The docking was a critical phase of the joint mission. Colonel, could you describe it, and would you describe the reaction of the crews on meeting in space after such a long preparation?
Mr. President, I am sure that our joint flight is the beginning for future cooperation in space between our countries. Thank you very much for very nice work to us. I will do our best.
Colonel, I think you and the other 4 have done very, very well so far, and may I congratulate you and your associates on this great achievement. Now, Dr. Slayton, Deke, you've had a very, very long record of distinguished service preparing other astronaut crews for various space missions. And we're extremely pleased to see you on the crew of the first international manned space flight. As the world's oldest space rookie, do you have any advice for young people who hope to fly on future space missions?
Deke Slayton has to retrieve somebody's headset. As we say, his was borrowed by Colonel Leonid. This necessitates another snake pit sort of a curvette up there.
Deke, did you have a chance to hear my question?
No, sir, Mr. President, unfortunately.
Can I repeat it? And
Wait so long. Well, Tom just repeated it for me, sir. Well, yes, I have a lot of advice for young people, but I guess probably one of the most important bits to, number one, decide what you really want to do, and then secondly, never give up until you've done it.
well, you're a darn good example, Deke, of never giving up and continuing. I know it is a great feeling of success from your point of view to have made this flight and to be on board with your 4 associates. Vance Brand, I know that you're still in the Apollo and holding the fort there. It's been my observation that the crews on both sides have worked very hard to learn either Russian on the one hand or English on the other. Has this training period, which is so important stood the test in the complicated procedures that all of you must execute in this very delicate mission?
Mr. President, I believe it really has. I think, in a way, our project, in particular the training that we've undergone, has been a sort of a model for future similar projects. I think it's been a real pleasant experience to work on learning Russian and be able to work with the cosmonauts. I think we'll have some ideas that would probably help people in the future on similar tasks.
Thank you very much, Vance. I might like to say a word or two to Valery Kubasov, the other member of the cosmonaut crew. I might say to him, as well as Colonel Leonid, I remember both of you on that enjoyable Saturday last September when both crews visited the White House and joined me in a picnic over in Virginia. We flew from the White House over to this picnic just across the river. We had some crab specialties that I enjoyed, and I think you did. I'm sure you're having a little different menu, somewhat different food on this occasion. What are you having over there out in space?
Well, we're about to have, I think, maybe loss of signal before very much longer.
Let me say in conclusion, we look forward to your safe return. It's been a tremendous demonstration of cooperation between our scientists, our technicians, and of course our astronauts and their counterparts, the cosmonauts from the Soviet Union. I congratulate everybody connected with the flight, and particularly the 5 of you who are setting this outstanding example of what we have to do in the future to make it a better world. And may I say, in signing off, here's to a soft landing.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. President. It's certainly been an honor to serve the country and work here.
We'll see you when you get back.
Yes, sir.
And so we've had space walks and we've had space meetings, and now we've had a lot of space talks, a great deal of communication. The Soviet Party Chairman Brezhnev was first in a more Europeanized formal statement, and then the President of the United States in a more relaxed fashion that perhaps is typical of Western communication, a little more open field running there in terms of whom we'll talk to next first and what we'll ask him. But both of the Soviets managed to answer, I think, rather explicitly and well. Leonid first, responding to the question, saying that he'll continue to try to do his best, and Kubasov thanking the President for his interest in him and saying very much the same thing. So the great meeting in space has taken place, and visitors are now aboard with the cosmonauts in the orbiting Soyuz 19. Vance Brand is watching the shop back at home in the Apollo. There's going to be a ceremonial joint meal for Stafford and for Deke Slayton and for Leonid and Kubasov, courtesy of the Soviets. And then that will, of course, be followed by second and third transfers, as they call, as all the men get a chance to see what the other spacecraft looks like and to, more importantly, intermix with each other socially and discuss the triumph, it must be said, of this space flight. The continuing coverage of the flight of Apollo-Soyuz. For now, this is Reed Collins, CBS News, Space Headquarters in New York.
3 p.m. CBS News. After nearly 2 decades of space rivalry, a Russian cosmonaut and an American astronaut have shaken hands in space, successfully completing the historic Apollo-Soyuz rendezvous. I'm Stephanie Shelton reporting on the CBS radio network. Just a short time ago, Apollo Commander Thomas Stafford removed the last barrier between the two linked ships. It sounded like this.
All right, order show. Oxford you loop 3.
Okay, I'm opening hatch 3. Hello.
It'll stay open. Go ahead. Go ahead, Tom. Lexi. Just a moment.
How are things going?
Film, then we'll cut it. Turn it off, and we'll turn it on. Okay, 51, you're supposed to go in there, so you come in here and shake hands. Hey, Sudal, пожалуйста.
Come here, please.
Viewers on Earth watched as cameras within the spaceship showed Stafford's hand coming through the docking tunnel, grasped by cosmonaut Alexei Leonid. Then came the traditional Russian bear hug of greeting and the official words of greeting. A message from President Ford was beamed up to the spacemen.
The astronauts are on the line, sir.
Gentlemen, let me call to express my very great admiration for your hard work, your total dedication in preparing for this first joint flight. All of us here in Washington in the United States send to you our very warmest congratulations for your successful rendezvous and for your docking, and we wish you the very best for a successful completion of the remainder of your mission.
Soviet leader Brezhnev also sent up a message to the spacemen. Soon the astronauts and cosmonauts will share a meal in the Soyuz. More coming up.
News of the hour on the hour from American Information Radio. This is George Engel, and at this hour, Soviet and American leaders are praising the spacemen of Soyuz and Apollo. The astronauts and cosmonauts met face-to-face in the docking. With Confederate, the first
indicate the country is snapping from
Kubasov, the Soyuz, and President Ford spoke to them all by radio telephone.
Gentlemen, let me call to express my very great admiration for your hard work, total dedication in preparing for this first joint flight.
Even before President Ford's call, the 4 spacemen and astronaut Vance Brand, who stayed in the Apollo, were congratulated by Soviet leader Brezhnev. The 2 U.S. astronauts are scheduled to spend about another hour with the 2 Russian cosmonauts, and correspondent Bill Larson reports from the Apollo-Soyuz News Center.
It's dinner time in space right now for the crews of Apollo and Soyuz, a dinner being served and shared in the spaceship. And if Soviet cosmonaut Alexei Leonid does as promised, he's serving up borscht to his guests. The crews of the 2 spaceships will trade 3 more visits before they undock for the last about 42 hours from now. Between now and then, the astronauts and cosmonauts will exchange such things as certificates of docking, flags, certificates, copies of the agreement that initiated this flight, and placards split in half on the ground for rejoining during the mission.
Astronauts Tom Stafford and Dave Slade have been inside the Soyuz spacecraft.
first historic and symbolic handshake between Apollo's Thomas Stafford and Alexei Leonid of Soyuz. I'm Stephanie Sheldon reporting on the CBS Radio Network, and we have more details on that meeting from Reed Collins in the CBS News Space Headquarters.
With flags and messages exchanged and flight documents signed, it was time to break bread together. The two visiting astronauts sat at the green portable table in the Soyuz orbital compartment, and the cosmonaut Tom Stafford offered a running commentary as the items were unwrapped.
Right now, I've just finished some strawberries reconstituted, and Deke and I are fixating some too. We're getting ready to eat some borscht. After that, I'm going to have a turkey with apple and cranberry sauce. Also, I have apple juice here, which they made a little joke and had a different label on the other side of it. This is yellowish pea salt. This is apple juice.
And so the first joint meal in space was added to the series of firsts this day in Apollo-Soyuz. This is Reed Collins, CBS News Space Headquarters in New York.
Astronaut Thomas Stafford took along a special gift for the cosmonauts, a tape of Conway Twitty singing his country song, Hello, Darlin', in Russian. Twitty says he made the tape in April at Stafford's suggestion, learning the lyrics phonetically after they were translated into Russian by a University of Oklahoma. More in a moment.
Space Center.
Apollo-Soyuz, a project technical director, Glenn Lunny, has just concluded a news conference. It's been going on for 5 years. Harry Walsh has just returned from that news conference while I monitored it here at our broadcast booth. Harry, I got the distinct impression that a lot of people are beginning to change their minds from a negative point of view on their joint space missions to perhaps a little more positive point of view.
That may have been, David. It may have, I believe the most important statement Lunny made was his assertion that the most important thing accomplished today was to have the United States and the Soviet Union working as co-equal partners in the project, instead of one being the dominant provider of technology and the other being a provider and cooperative users of raw materials. And I believe this points up the basically political or fundamentally political nature of this mission, which far outdistances the problems of navigation, propulsion, scientific experiments, or anything else.
And I also noticed that he confirmed the communications problems that we've had on and off for the last couple of days by simply stating what ground in the spacecraft and between the ground from one ground to the other.
Most of the technical questions in the news conference did have to do with the communication problems, which seem to be an abiding problem on this mission.
And from what Glenn Lunny said, they're working on that, and hopefully we'll have it clear so that when the astronauts are speaking, they're not overriding what the cosmonauts may be speaking at time. And speaking of the crews, Deke Slayton and Tom Stafford are still in the Soyuz spacecraft. They will be for about another 25-30 minutes. They will depart. Both crews then will begin a rather long rest period because it has been a very long day for them today. Bright and early tomorrow morning, they start again with Alexei Leonid visiting the Apollo command craft. And we'll be out here to bring you that visit. This is David Crane with Harry Walsh at the Johnson Space Center.
This is The World Tonight. Good evening, I'm Douglas Edwards, CBS News. They met, they docked, they conquered all. The American Apollo spacecraft caught up with the Soviet Soyuz today over South America, and Houston Control relayed the message to proceed with the mechanical part of their rendezvous.
Moscow is go for docking. Houston is go for docking. It's up to you guys. Have fun. All right, sounds good. Follow Vito, Alexei.
A few minutes later, over the European continent, the countdown began, and the action was completed.
Less than 5 meters distance.
3 meters.
3 meters.
Okay,
1 meter. Contact. Capture. We also have capture. We have succeeded. Now, everything is excellent.
About About 3 hours later, the much heralded meeting, the handshake of détente, the historic moment when men from different nations met for the first time in space. Reed Collins reports from the CBS News Space Headquarters in New York.
The last hatch opened to cries of greeting from both sides as Stafford and Leonid clasped hands, and Slayton reached through the hatch to give his opposite a hug around the shoulder. Greetings from the heads of state required the men to exchange headsets, and that put the program somewhat behind schedule, but they proceeded to an exchange of flags and gifts. And in the Soyuz orbital compartment, the four men gathered around a collapsible table to sign the flight documents to be entered with the International Aviation Federation. The formalities began to recede around that green table when the cosmonauts broke out the evening meal, and the four literally broke bread together. Forgotten was an acrid odor first detected when Stafford and Slayton had opened the hatch of the docking module. The source of it not certain, but not a problem. They will undock on Saturday after several more exchanges. Soyuz has limited endurance, and it must return to the Earth Monday. Apollo is to fly on until July 24th. This is Reed Collins, CBS News, Space Headquarters, New York.
More news after this.
CBS News. Thousands of demonstrators are marching in the streets of Lisbon tonight, massing against Portugal's leftist rulers. I'm Jerry Landay, reporting on the CBS radio network. Today, when President Gerald Ford radioed congratulations to cosmonauts and astronauts gathered together in Soyuz on the first day of link-up.
It's taken us many years to open this door to useful cooperation in space between our two countries. And I'm confident that the day is not far off when space missions made possible by this first joint effort will be more or less commonplace.
Those words from the President. Little seems commonplace today, 140 miles above the Earth. Both crews are now asleep, leaving until tomorrow a possible problem with the hatch seal of Soyuz.
Frank, who have you got at the Johnson Space Center?
Well, Frank, I'm going to tell you something. The gentleman that I have as my guest this evening, well, let me put it this way. While you people are just involved in talking about the UFOs or such things, my guest this evening is involved in a project that's actually going to do something about going out and searching for life on a distant planet. And his name is Don Bain. He's from TRW Systems. TRW Systems has played a major role in the development of in the space age. They've been involved in just about every major program that I can remember, including Apollo, Skylab. They are also the designers and builders of Pioneer 10 and Pioneer 11, that incredible little spacecraft that sent us back the magnificent pictures and the great in-depth research into Jupiter.
C News is brought.
Of the hour, on the hour, from American Information Radio. This is George Engel, and at this hour, the Apollo and Soyuz crewmen are asleep in space after a busy and productive day's work. A minor air leak, which delayed their bedtime about an hour, has been temporarily fixed by sealing the docking tunnel between the American and Russian ships for the night. That tunnel was used as a passageway today, as the astronauts and cosmonauts greeted each other, and the Russians hosted their American counterparts for dinner in Soyuz. Work on the joint space experiments is to begin tomorrow. And as the mission continues, some Russians are trying to make a few rubles out of the event. As correspondent Ernest Weatherall reports from Moscow.
The Soviets apparently picked up a few capitalistic rip-offs after their visit to Cape Canaveral. They have begun a campaign of tie-in sales as a result of the Apollo-Soyuz mission. For example, an ordinary bottle of vodka in a special box with the spaceflight and emblem on it is double the usual price. Then there are cigarettes with the official insignia, perfume, a big issue of stamps and first-day covers of the Soyuz flight. And the biggest caper of all, space food at $6 a package. So for $6, you get chicken with prunes, borscht, rice and mutton, and other goodies, all in a toothpaste tube. Ernest Weatherall, ABC News at the Soyuz News Center, Moscow.
CBS News, Portugal.
Portugal's military rulers appeal for calm hours after they dissolve the coalition government. This is Doug Poling reporting on the CBS radio network. Astronauts and 2 Soviet cosmonauts are in a sleep period right now. Their Soyuz and Apollo spaceships linked together following a history-making maneuver on Thursday. With millions watching and listening on Earth, the spacemen docked their ships and exchanged visits. They worked, joked, and had a meal in joint activity which lasted several hours. Late Thursday night, there was fear of some problem on the Soyuz. The cosmonauts reported a leak of pressure. It turned out to be an unexpected gauge reading due to a slight change in temperature, and the matter was declared resolved. This is Dallas Townsend for the CBS World News Roundup. The crews of the Apollo-Soyuz manned space flight today continue their exchanges of astronauts and cosmonauts. Nelson Benton reports from the Johnson Space Center.
The docked American and Russian spacecraft circled this morning with a mixed crew aboard each. The Soyuz commander, Leonid, riding at the side of his American counterpart, Tom Stafford, in the Apollo. American pilot Vance Brand in the second seat of the Soyuz with flight engineer Valery Kubasov. In a lengthy exercise designed for morning television audiences in the United States, Kubasov used a prepared English script to describe various features of the Russian spacecraft. Stafford drawled his own style of Russian in a description of the Apollo with Leonid at his side. The Russian and American spacecraft will continue their joint flight for another day. Handling the Apollo-Soyuz story. Practically the entire front page of the Soviet Communist Party newspaper Pravda is devoted this morning to the meeting in space. The Russians call it Kosmosya. In bold headlines, Pravda's lead story is captioned Apollo docking done. Another headline in Pravda praises both the cosmonauts and astronauts for performing in what is termed masterly fashion. Pravda doesn't acknowledge that docking occurred 6 minutes early. The headline says exactly on schedule. And nowhere in the entire 6-page edition is there any mention of any problems in the flight, such as the difficulty with Russian TV cameras aboard Soyuz. A newsman asked Soviet officials why the message from Soviet leader Leonid Brezhnev to the cosmonauts and astronauts was read by someone else. The official said that someone was chosen for his special resonant voice, then hastened to add, not that Mr. Brezhnev does not have a resonant voice. The question, he added, is why President Ford delivered his own remarks rather than having someone do it for him. Steve Young, CBS News, Moscow.
Everything continues to go extremely well aboard the 2 United spacecraft. We are now preparing for a TV view of the Soviet Union with Alexei Leonid and Valery Kubasov explaining the country as they pass over it. Later in this orbit, Apollo commander Tom Stafford will do likewise as they fly over Florida. He will use a handheld camera and point it down towards Florida and describe this country to the Russians as we do the flyby there. Earlier, or shortly after the initial crew transfer, which started at about 4 this morning, Alexei Leonid greeted Tom Stafford with a picture. You know, Leonid is quite an artist. Stafford accepted the picture and talked to Mission Control here and said, gee, can you see this picture? It kind of looks like me, but I wish you would have added a little more hair. At that point, Stafford took Leonid on a tour of the Apollo command module.
I'll continue our orientation. When we are orienting the Soyuz, we see it through the telescope. I asked all the systems on the ship have primary and backup capacity. Yes. All systems have a main and reserve element. For instance, this is the main and reserve indicator. inertial platform. Our electro-energizers have a backup capacity. I asked, does it take a long time to learn to operate all the systems of the spacecraft? A long time, Alyosha. 1 year in order to operate all the systems. Where do you think of the commanders of Apollo?
And while this was going on, astronaut Vance Brand was getting a similar briefing from Valery Kubasov and the Russian spacecraft Soyuz. Harry, to tell you the truth, I really only stood one word there of Tom Stafford's Russian, and that was telescope, and it sounded very American to me.
Yes, his pronunciation is very American. It's quite an interesting blend of American pronunciation and Russian syntax.
Or, as Leonid described it several weeks ago, it is rather unusual to hear Russian spoken with an Oklahoman accent. This is David Crane with Harry Walsh at the Johnson Space Center.
News of the hour on the hour from American Information Radio. This is John Grimes, and at this hour, astronaut Vance Brand's getting his first look at the inside of the Soyuz spaceship. Soyuz commander Alexei Leonov floated through the tunnel to visit Slayton and Stafford aboard Apollo. Inside Soyuz, cosmonaut Valery Kubasov welcomed Brand, and then through a Russian translator in Houston asked,
what you like to say? How do you like the Soyuz spacecraft?
Of course, Valery, wouldn't be in here right now if I didn't enjoy coming in and looking around, and looks to us like it'd be a good airplane, a good spacecraft to be flying in. We've really enjoyed your tour here.
Astronaut Vance Brand. Later today, the five spacemen hold a joint farewell news conference, answering questions from newsmen on the ground in Houston. Apollo and Soyuz undock tomorrow.
CBS News. Renewed fighting between Israeli troops and Arab guerrillas on the Israeli-Lebanese border has been followed by a suspicious incident near Tel Aviv. This is Dallas Townsend reporting on the CBS Radio Network. The astronauts and the cosmonauts are having another busy day in space. Nelson Bennett reports from the Johnson Space Center.
Soyuz cosmonauts this morning sent down television pictures that spy satellites have been transmitting for years. But this morning, it was accompanied by commentary with a Russian accent.
We are approaching the Volga River now. This river is the biggest in Europe.
That was the voice of flight engineer Valery Kubasov as he narrated the Soyuz Apollo pass over Russia, noting that his country covers 1/6 of the Earth's surface, mixing topical and topographical comments in his description of the view below. All three American astronauts have visited the Soyuz. Flight engineer Kubasov will move into the Apollo to look around later today. After a news conference with ground-to-air questions, the cosmonauts and astronauts will say their goodbyes and shut themselves into their own spacecraft, which will separate for unilateral operations tomorrow. Nelson Benton, CBS News, Johnson Space Center.
a.m. CBS News. Israeli forces and Arab guerrillas have clashed again at the Lebanese border. Arrests involving bombs at the airport in Tel Aviv, but continued progress, apparently, in peace bargaining in Washington. I'm Christopher Glenn, reporting on the CBS Radio Network. Some cosmonauts mingled in their joined spacecraft in orbit again today, taking earthbound viewers on a television tour of the Apollo and Soyuz vehicles, and again they shared food. The atmosphere of friendship was easy to spot. Here's astronaut Vance Brand speaking in Russian, his words being translated into English by an interpreter.
So this is my first time in orbit. And we have found very good hospitality here aboard the Soyuz.
That's U.S. astronaut Vance Brand speaking through an interpreter.
It's time that we had dinner. Time to have dinner. Fine, Vance. Thank you. Do you like to find the Soyuz spacecraft? Of course. The Soyuz is a very good spaceship. Thank you very much.
With the third and final crew transfer, Apollo Commander Tom Stafford will once again visit the Soyuz spacecraft, along with Alexei Leonid, and finally, the flight engineer, Valery Kubasov, will have an opportunity after a day and a half now to get inside the Apollo spacecraft. Later on today, the transfer will end at about 4 o'clock. The crews will say their goodbyes. The final farewells of this historic 2 days in space, the meeting in space. The undocking to take place tomorrow morning. The Soyuz spaceship will come down, splash down Monday morning. They don't splash down. That's a bad habit got them through Apollo. They will land in the Soviet soil. The Apollo astronauts, meanwhile, will continue for 3 more days before they splash down in the Pacific next Thursday. This is David Crane with Harry Walsh at the Johnson Space Center.
News of the hour on the hour from American Information Radio. This is Bob Walker, and at this hour, spacemen visited each other in orbit again this morning. The cosmonauts gave an English language tour of their homeland, while Apollo Commander Tom Stafford gave a tour of the Apollo spacecraft, speaking in Russian. Argentina begun pressurization procedures for the third of their cosmic house calls, a joint press conference from space scheduled in about an hour and a half. Stops and other news after this.
CBS News. The astronauts and cosmonauts are preparing a news conference as they continue their own kind of shuttle diplomacy. This is Douglas Edwards reporting on the CBS radio network. There was much backslapping and handshaking as the space travelers moved through the tunnel connecting the two ships today. CBS News correspondent Reed Collins has more on the joint mission from CBS Space Headquarters in New York.
In a short time, the Apollo-Soyuz crew will conduct a flying news conference. With Leonid and Stafford in the Soyuz and the remainder of the men in the Apollo, questions submitted in advance and screened by Western and Communist newsmen will be beamed up. Ahead also are some further East-West exchanges of microbes. Biologists excited about this chance to swap Russian germs endemic to Russian bodies with those microbes living in the West on American pelts. There have been frequent communication hitches in this elaborate linkage that ties Moscow, Houston, and the joint spacecraft together. This is Reed Collins, CBS News, Space Headquarters, New York.
Third crew exchange has just been completed. Chief of the astronaut commanded the astronaut troop, Tom Stafford, and Soyuz commander, Leonid, are now in the Soyuz spacecraft. They've just completed this, and we're now picking up a pass over Quito, Ecuador. The tracking station there, and Stafford and Leonid have just given thanks to that crew. Leonid in English, and quite good English, I believe, Harry, as he said, thank you very much for your aid, your valuable assistance in providing the communications to Moscow Mission Control and to the Houston Mission Control, and we hope to see you someday. Valery Kubasov is now taking his first visit inside the Apollo command craft. He just returned there with Vance Brand. They have spent the last 3 hours in the Soyuz spacecraft. As you may have heard earlier, as we heard Valery Kubasov giving quite a detailed explanation, Harry, of the Soyuz spacecraft. And I believe at one point Moscow Mission Control told him to cool it a little bit.
Yes, Valery Kubasov tends to be quite expansive, and he was going on and on and on, and they kept trying to get him to stop because he didn't want to end his broadcast. And I at one time believe he flatly refused to stop broadcasting.
He was having a good time. I think he was enjoying speaking English over television. Real ham actor.
Yes.
They all appear to be having an extremely good time, a valuable time. They're still carrying on more experiments on this particular pass. Tom Stafford and Leonid will do a little skin grafting, you might say, in some form, as they're going to test each other for germs. This is one experiment that we talked about a few days ago that is being conducted. It's the first time they've had the experience to commingle germs from two different parts of the planet. So they are taking samples from the cosmonauts that will be returned to Earth here, and the astronauts to Moscow Center, and determine what has happened to the germs from the two different portions of the Earth after they have mingled in space for a couple of days.
It might be interesting. We might create the first space monster, David.
We'll be back with a look at today's activities, the rest of the afternoon's activities, in just a moment. And Harry, that's to be a very brief one, I believe, for Deke Slayton.
That's right. Later on this afternoon, after the press conference, David, Deke Slayton is scheduled to go through the docking module and spend about 15 minutes inside the orbital module of the Soyuz, and then return for the
And I think Deke, too, will leave some of his germs with the Russian crew to return to Russia, and then they will determine, well, here are some American germs that have been commingled with Russian germs, and we'll see what we create here. Deke will also, on the way back, start picking up the bits and pieces of cables and cords and equipment and make sure everything is stowed away. On his way back through the docking module, we'll close down that system, and that will be the final check of the docking module.